Welcome into the No House Advantage Strategy Show. We appreciate you hanging with us. Myself, Greg Ehrenberg's in the house. Tyler's producing. The three of us with you. We only ask that you hit that thumbs up button and make sure you're subscribed across the board here. Everything going on at Awesemo. We're going to give you a match up to $25. Your first deposit. Use our promo code Awesemo. And Greg, we had to call an audible. Normally during the week, this is our NFL strategy show where we dive as deep as we can into the Thursday night football No House Advantage contest. But at the time in which you and I are here congregating, talking about NHA, their tournament isn't up as of now. So we have to pivot to the NBA.
We waited as long as we could. This decision was made very, very last minute where you and I are discussing the ins and outs of the NBA slate as of 5 minutes ago, trying to figure out what it was we were going to do. And ultimately it was, Eytan's very, very busy man. He's got all kinds of stuff to do to pay for diapers. So he's got other tapings he's got to do. He's got to be famous and be on TV. And so we were like, hey, let's just do this. Now we're doing NBA instead of NFL. So if anybody's confused why there's, a football player on the cover of this video, and then we're talking about NBA, that's the reason why.
Yeah, blame me because I need diapers.
Yes.
I love it. Exactly. I should just put my Venmo out here on the chat and say, all right, now I can do the show any time of day, whenever you want me, I'm on call. And instead of hitting the thumbs up, just put it towards the diaper fund or whatever it is.
And this isn't even for Eytan's baby. This is for Eytan himself who needs diapers. So in case people were confused by that as well, that's other information you should know. You should feel bad for this man.
Well, look, I'm glad that you at least clarified for that because people may donate out of sympathy and say, look, the poor guy, look at him. He has no business having a kid in the first place, this kid here. But you're right. You sit in this chair for 9-10 hours a day, Greg. It's hard. I'll leave it at that, my friend. So the different strategy that we have, and it's going to be a different show here doing the NBA by all means, because the NFL, it's one game. We have a bunch of different players throughout, a couple different positions. It's easy for us to go through everybody. In this case, we're going to go hand in hand with what Alex and Team Awesemo have as far as the No House Advantage projections, which are right down to the T, including the optimal lineups, right, where they're essentially telling you, Greg, here, play this, plug and play this. So we have a ton of projections we can go through and kind of pick and choose more from a player standpoint.
Yeah, and the other thing I should mention too is there are not one, not two, not three. There's like 80 players out because of COVID right now. There was also a game canceled today. The Toronto Raptors Chicago Bulls game isn't being played. So a couple things. Number one, you don't want players from that game. But number two, also, if you see anybody who's in the player pool that has any kind of over-under projection, they're not playing. Don't just take a bunch of guys like Reggie Jackson, Luke Kennard. They're not playing today. They're in the COVID protocols. So anybody who's out the roster, even if you take the under, obviously if Reggie Jackson is out and he's over under 19.5 points, if you take the under there, it's still a loss because players who are inactive, it just counts as a loss.
Right. And that's a huge thing that I think people that are new to NHA may not know, that they think, oh, let me game the system here. It's a very dangerous game. So you have to constantly be updating what you're doing. And look, now more than ever, if it's DFS, if it's NHA, if it's placing a bet, if it's just buying a ticket to go down to a game, you better be sure you know, A, if it's being played and also, who's playing it. So let's look. And again, we'll be sorting out through and looking at where we have on Awesemo projections. We can look at a couple of overs just because they're the most fun, right? As opposed to rooting for bad, poor nights. You mentioned so many people are out. The one guy that is kind of interesting to start with because of somebody who's out, but the game itself is still going. That's DeMarcus Cousins. Has a bunch of high numbers, Greg, next to him from rebounds, PRA, PR, and PA. And let me remind everybody out there, you can't load up on Cousins. You can only choose one here, and they're pretty sharp as far as between them. Is there any of those four that are all pretty heavy overs that maybe jump out more so to you with Cousins?
Can't go wrong here, in my opinion. I think that every single one of these overs is very, very likely to hit. So the key here is you look at the Milwaukee Bucks injury situation / COVID situation. So Brook Lopez is out. He had back surgery. We're taking him out of the equation. Then you got Bobby Portis, who's played a lot of the center minutes recently. He's in COVID protocols. Giannis often plays center minutes. He's in COVID protocols. So as a result, Boogie has started each of the last 2 games, and it's been somewhat mixed results. However, these numbers are so low that it kind of doesn't even matter. So here's what we got out of DeMarcus Cousins in the 2 starts that he had. First one, he played 16 minutes, immediately got into foul trouble. I think he had 2 fouls 2 minutes into the game, and then also picked up a technical foul. And just kind of his overall attitude, that limited the amount of time that he was on the court. He only played 16 minutes. Last game, he ends up playing 27 minutes in a game that was a blowout. If that game was more competitive, he probably would have played north of 30 minutes. He ends up putting up 12 points with 12 rebounds in that game. Even the first game, where he only played limited minutes, he had 9 points and 6 rebounds. So you look at these numbers for DeMarcus Cousins, over under 4.5 rebounds, over under 11.5 points plus rebounds, assists, over under 9.5 points plus rebounds. Every single one of these is going to hit today. Doesn't matter. To me, free square, play whichever one you want. I guess the rebounds is the one I'll say is most likely, just because we have with a 99.47% chance to hit the over. But realistically, you want the over on all of these. You can only play one per lineup. Free square, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it, man. So let's move from that, because you really can just, and I love how you laid it out. Free square is perfect definition of it. Haliburton then comes in right under Cousins, and that's another game that is going on as of right now and looks to be a strong play. You know, I don't know how that Magic Hawks game is going to go on, but that's neither here. Haliburton, though, comes in as a pretty strong overplay for assists. The line on NHA has him at 5.5. Projection looks pretty strong there.
Yeah, so here's the King situation where we have, but this is a lot. Some of these injuries, which, by the way, if you guys haven't caught, I do these injury report shows, me and Adam Schur. And at first we started doing, it's like, hey, smaller slate, we've got a couple guys to talk about. Now it's just, I go through half the shows, I'm just reading these injury report lists. And the Kings being one of these teams. So here's the current situation with the Kings. These are all guys in the COVID protocols. Terrence Davis, Lewis King, Marvin Bagley III, De'Aaron Fox, Neemias Queta, Alex Len, nice, and Davion Mitchell. There is a lot of playing time available in the backcourt. So we've seen Tyrese Haliburton pick up a ton of these minutes as of late. So recent games for Tyrese Haliburton, we have seen him play 41 minutes, 37 minutes, 38 minutes, 36 minutes. His assists in each of those 4 games, 9, 10, 11, 11. Love the over for assists here. It's one of the stronger plays on the board.
You know, it's funny, just not in the truest human sense of it, but just in the ridiculousness of going through these projections and having to factor in how likely it is somebody goes over a projection with who's around him, and then going through that long list. And I'm thinking you have at least an equally long list when you're looking at Wright on the Hawks around him. We don't have Young. We don't have Capella. We don't have Lou Williams. We don't have Gallinari, right? I mean, that's just the 4 that come to mind. I think TLC, there's some others, right, that are out here. This is another scenario where Wright, we have over for both rebounds and points and rebounds pretty strong.
Yeah, so the players that you missed noting on there, DeAndre Hunter also out. You mentioned TLC, Lou Williams, Clint Capella, Trae Young, Solomon Hill's out for the season, Danilo Gallinari, another team that's just a total mess. So here's what they had to do just to fill out the roster for today. It's something you and I were talking about before. I have no clue how the NBA decides this game must play, this game gets canceled. The Hawks had to sign Lance Stevenson, Malcolm Hill, and Wes Iwundu just to fill out the roster for tonight's game. They also called up Jalen Johnson from the G League. So it's another team that's just really thin. With that in mind, I assume Delon Wright is going to have to start and play pretty significant minutes. He's another guy. These numbers, the overs all look really enticing because of the amount of players that are out. The one we project the best is the over for 3.5 assists. I don't have an issue with the over. I don't have an issue with any of these overs. All of them look really strong. In terms of which one I would feel best about, it's probably over 13.5 points plus rebounds and assists. I have all these going well over. That's the one I'd feel the best about because there's multiple avenues to get there. You know, it could be a situation with Delon Wright. Maybe he just only gets to 3 assists or something like that. But in some way, I think the points, rebounds, assists, some combination of them should all be there. So that's the one I feel best about.
All right. As much as we would love to stay on the overs and pound away at people playing well, and it's always nice to see guys hit overs, there are some legit percentages, at least in the unders, that we should take note of. Actually, to be honest with you, it really doesn't look like it. As I sort through all these guys who are hurt, and pardon me, Greg, because it's a just mash unit of people who are out, we really still can stay in the overs and have a stronger percentage of stuff hitting. Now we're in the high 80s for both here, but Batum, Bledsoe, these guys, even Cam Reddish, pop up now as far as better percentage plays in the over than anybody we can get to on the under.
I actually think a lot of the unders make sense for Daniel Theis if we see Christian Wood play, which recent reports indicate that he is going to play. We saw Christian Wood was listed as questionable heading into the day. He's since been upgraded to probable. So with that said, Daniel Theis, I do not expect to be a big part of the rotation today. He could even end up getting 0 minutes, but not somebody who's going to be inactive. Right. We have to worry about his props getting voided, just to the point where I think he's probably going to be behind. Well, he's certainly going to be behind Christian Wood, and then potentially behind Şengün for the backup big man minutes as well. So these numbers for Daniel Theis are kind of set based on what we've seen from him recently when Christian Wood was out and Daniel Theis was starting. Now we have Daniel Theis over under 9.5 points plus assists, points plus rebounds, assists 14.5. I like the under on both of these quite a bit, just because I think that he's probably going to play very limited minutes if he plays at all with Christian Wood healthy for the Rockets.
So if he's active, but he doesn't play a minute, do we still cash props or are those voided?
They still cash.
Okay. Which is good to know that you don't need a minute, because that might be a deterrent for people thinking, oh, well, this guy's not going to play. Well, if he's suiting up and he's active, then you're still going to get credit for it. Then that's a hell of an angle right there that you can play with guys, because we're going to give you projections on site for everybody. It doesn't matter if that guy's projected for 38 minutes or 60 seconds.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons also the Daniel, and he might get on the court, but I just don't expect it to be for extended minutes, and it's going to be something like Wood or Şengün gets into foul trouble. But the unders for Daniel Theis do look really good, but also the point you said before, it's not like we have to take only unders or only overs. And right now we do have a lot, or we don't have to mix and match them. I do think the unders for Daniel Theis look really good, but overall there are a lot more favorable looking unders than overs than unders. My mistake, overs than unders for this reason. We have all these injury situations, COVID situations, where there's so many players out. They're just guys with really low projected prop totals here that are fairly likely to hit the over. There isn't really an inverse situation. There's not a situation where somebody gets ruled out. It's like, oh my God, this under looks so good now. It's the opposite. So in general, with the way NHA is set up, the overs are going to be more favorable for NBA than are the unders.
Make sure you all hit that thumbs up button and you're subscribed here. We've got the odds channel, the season long, and of course the mothership here, the DFS. You know, Bazley is getting some pretty favorable grades on an under, 93% on his PRA. It's a big number at 19.5, and the projection is pretty wide. And that's another game that looks pretty strong that it's going to go on no matter the circumstances with a couple of other games we mentioned. But I don't know how much that's factored into just who's around him versus how many people are down.
Yeah, so you said Bazley, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so here's the situation with Bazley and why it's kind of more of a wait and see for me. He's started a lot of the season for the Thunder, but all of a sudden the last two games, they're like, eject button. We're taking Darius Bazley out of the starting lineup, moved him to a bench role. As a result, pretty big downtick in minutes. So Darius Bazley as a starter this year is averaging 27.5 minutes per game. Last two games came off the bench, played 24 minutes in each of them. 3.5 minutes is a pretty big deal when we're talking about counting stats for the NBA. The less time you're on the court, the less time you have to accumulate those kind of counting stats. But yeah, I mean, that 19.5 number, if he's only going to be playing 24 minutes, it's a little bit too high for me personally. Let's see, what would I have as a fair number? I think a fair number is probably around 15. We have Bazley projected. Yeah, we have him for 14.5. The number is 19.5. So yeah, pretty strong under there, considering that he now has a new role where he's just come off the bench, and it looks like NHA is not adjusted for that.
Yeah, I think looking at a couple of other guys that have some pretty strong gaps, wide gaps, probably a better way to define it, between Alex and Awesemo's projection and what NHA has as the line. You know, Rashawn Holmes, who talked about the Kings, right? 28 to 23, 28.5 on NHA to 23 is a projected PRA. And then we can also look at that Bucks game without Giannis and some productivity that may spill over in certain areas, but clearly not for Holiday and the rebounds, because that's at 6.5, and that's nearly a 2 full rebound gap between our projection and NHA.
Yeah. So, well, Jrue Holiday, though, I don't know if I agree with our projection there. So Jrue Holiday is in a really favorable situation just overall for fantasy and for picking up counting stats now because of the injury situation. So some of the same things with Boogie apply here. There is no Brooke Lopez. There's no Dante DiVincenzo, no Giannis, no Bobby Portis for the Milwaukee Bucks. So we're going to see Jrue Holiday play a whole bunch of minutes, and he's going to have to also take on a whole bunch of usage, which doesn't impact his rebound rate per se. But just the amount of time he's going to be out on the court, I don't feel super comfortable going to any kind of unders with Jrue Holiday. The 6.5 might be a little bit too high. He's had 5 and 4 rebounds in the last 2 games that he's played, but he also had to play 44 games in an overtime game last time out. Those kind of minutes, I can't really take unders for Jrue Holiday. There's so many good values on the board. I'm going to be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it's a strong point, especially without Giannis, and then seeing what he's been able to do. Markkanen, I just wanted to get him in there really quick before we go back to a couple of overs here. There are 2 back-to-back for Markkanen right now. The PRA and simply the rebounds. Not much different between the 2. So I don't know if you want to take more of, I don't know if it's more of an advantage for you to add in the points and the assists to make sure that, it's harder for him to get there, or if you feel so confident in the rebound gap that it's simply just a single play there.
So here's something else that I should add about some of the projections we have. And this goes too, if you go to OddsShopper and look at some of the projections we have, oftentimes if somebody's listed as questionable, it kind of puts the projection in limbo and it's subject to change. So Kevin Love is questionable to play for the Cleveland Cavaliers today. This comes in addition to talking about teams that are dealing with COVID. Here are the players that are currently out for the Cavs: Evan Mobley, RJ Nembhard, Dylan Windler, Lamar Stevens, Ed Davis, Isaac Okoro, Jared Allen. They were all in the COVID protocol. That comes in addition to guys like Taco Fall not being on the roster right now, and Colin Sexton being out for the season. But if Kevin Love is out today, there's just so few guys to fill those front court minutes. Then you're looking at, here would be the available big men for the Cleveland Cavaliers if Kevin Love is out today: Markkanen, Chetty Osman, Dean Wade, Luke Cornett, if they choose to play him. And Luke Cornett is somebody who they just signed to a 10-day contract. So I don't know how much they're playing him on a 10-day contract. We could be looking at Lauri Markkanen playing north of 40 minutes if Kevin Love is out. If Kevin Love plays, okay, sure. I guess these numbers maybe consider them to be a little high. I would still be avoiding them. But if Kevin Love is out, these numbers actually might be a little bit too low because there's just nobody else to play minutes or take shots outside of Markkanen there in the front court.
All right, I'm curious because we were looking at him earlier in the week or day, pardon me, as far as there being so many people around him being decimated. And the 2 guys outside of Collins down low, but the 2 guys from the outside were Bogdanovich and Huerter. And we have some pretty strong plays here on the over. We're talking 86% that Huerter's points and assists go over. I would just think that if there was ever an opportunity for this man to explode, it would be against an Orlando team that's already dealing with issue, COVID to injury. Greg, on top of that, there's nobody on the outside that's going to vulture any shots away from him outside of Bogdanovich, but the 2 of them could have plenty of shots to take. And our projections are pretty strong, at least on the points, really PRA, but more so with points and assists.
Yeah, so here's how low these numbers are for Kevin Huerter. His over-under for points plus assists is 13.5. That would be too low for me if it was just the points, because of all the guys that are out for the Atlanta Hawks. Like we talked before about Delon Wright playing extended minutes, and Kevin Huerter. Here are the regular rotation players the Hawks have available today: John Collins, Kevin Huerter, Bogdanovich, Cam Reddish. That's it. Delon Wright is typically not a big part of this team's rotation. So with that in mind, I have to like overs for all of it, like John Collins, Kevin Huerter, Bogdanovich, Cam Reddish. But yeah, the Huerter numbers are egregiously too low considering the situation.
So just take the points and assists at that point, right? Because at 13.5 points alone are going to go over that. Look, who the hell knows with assists? We do have him projected there, but why play it so tight if you can go to points and assists and basically the assists don't matter at that point, right?
Let's see. Which would both of them are equally strong to me, and same in our projections. We have the over points plus assists hitting 86.5% of the time. And same with the assists, 86.4% of the time. So you can't go wrong with either of them. Slightly lean towards points plus assists, but both of them are very good values.
Anything with Terrence Mann, we're starting to get to that mid 80s still, though. And I think this is to the point that you raised earlier about guys coming in, even if it's somebody on a 10-day contract, that it's going to lean towards the overs here. It's going to lean towards guys taking shots and scoring against worse defense. Maybe that's factoring in, or simply just guys who don't have as many obstacles around them. Let's get one Jokic in there. Rebounds, 84.97% chance that he goes over his boards. And then also above him is Terrence Mann with an interesting PRA at only 17.5. And Alex has him smashing that one.
So the only concern I would have with Nikola Jokic is that they're playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, and maybe there would be some blowout risk there. Although with that said, actually, the spread for that game is only 5.5. It's the lowest spread on the slate. So I guess we can't really consider blowout risk there too much. Looking at my projections, I actually have Jokic fairly close to 15 rebounds, and Denver has Aaron Gordon listed as questionable today, and JaMychal Green is listed as questionable. If both those guys out, that's even more rebound opportunities for Nikola Jokic. So the number maybe at first glance, you say, like, how do we have it so high that over 11.5 rebounds we have hitting 85% of the time? I guess maybe that isn't egregious when you consider I have him project for around 15 rebounds, and then you could possibly even have him project for more rebounds if Gordon and JaMychal Green are rolled out.
Anybody else that you noticed here? Paul George threes, 2.5 projection. We have him pretty high compared to that number. It's an 82% chance of hitting, 82.5 to be fair.
You mentioned Terrence Mann before. I think a lot of the overs make sense here. So the most recent COVID news that we have for today is that Reggie Jackson is in the COVID protocols, and that's in addition to Marcus Morris being in the COVID protocols. Luke Kennard has a hip injury, so he's out today, but it's not because of COVID. But overall, this is a pretty shorthanded team. Also, Isaiah Hartenstein is out in the front court, which is more reason to think potentially the Clippers might play more smaller lineups. I think we could see plus or over 30 minutes for Terrence Mann today, and he's always been a good producer when he's on the court in terms of counting stats. So all these numbers for him look pretty advantageous towards the overs, and looks like we have points plus rebounds plus assists over 17.5, hitting 85% of the time. Let's see. What do I have his point? I have his points plus rebounds plus assists over 20. So I think that's a good play as well.
Awesome. Excellent stuff, man. Nice pivot here. We cover the NBA. Nobody can complain that they didn't get any NFL content when we just made you some money in the NBA tonight. As crazy and as wild, as chaotic as the league is, make sure you're paying attention to everything. And Greg referenced Odd Shopper. It's a great place to go. It's free for everything, all encompassing. If you wanted to use our projections and maybe not updating as much or as fast for NHA, everything's going to always update for the books as well. So you're covered across the board. Greg, man, we'll do it again. Hopefully. Well, that's it. No more Thursday night football for us.
I didn't even realize this is the end of it. Nice knowing you, Eytan. Good luck with the baby.
Seriously.
Good luck with the diapers and soiling yourself on camera. It's been real.
Good. I'm glad I could leave a lasting impression.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tyler. We'll see you guys. Have a great week. Merry Christmas.